Hi, welcome to Prayers Radio Conversations. I'm your host, Rich Jarvis. This is my co-host, John Waterhouse. This show is only about prayer. Ernest Holmes, which we call spiritual mind treatment in this philosophy. You got it, John.
Welcome, everybody. You're going to have a great time today because we have with us an iconic figure in the Science of Mind movement. This is Maggie Cole. She is a emeritus practitioner living in Northern California. If you were part of the United side of Science of Mind, you know Maggie because she was at Asilomar every summer, running the backstage and keeping us all in line and supporting us. And beyond all of that, she is an amazing practitioner. I would say she's a practitioner of practitioners. And what she brings with us today is a rich history of supporting this movement and people in it for many, many years. She was the recipient of the Practitioner Meritorious Award in 2018 and now serves and teaches classes through Unity of Houston. And is doing wonderful work there with many people. So we're very blessed to have her with us today. Hi, Maggie. Thank you for being here. I'm so happy you're here. And I would love it if you would open us in with a spiritual mind treatment.
Yes, sir. I invite everyone to be still. As the Spirit of God reveals itself in this moment. Mm-hmm. It still astounds me that God is here all the time. And when I am aware of it, as I am in this moment, I am filled to overflowing with His power, with His grace, with His absolute boundless joy. It's enthusiasm, it's creative genius. All the many things that it is, too much to even imagine, much less articulate. And in the midst of this, I realize that this is who and what I am, who and what John is, who and what Rich is, who all of us are. God is always here and always all is well. So abiding in this feeling tone, I speak my word for our time together. And I accept that God is revealed through each one of us. That anyone and everyone that is listening takes away something that feels good, that affirms and supports our intimate, vibrant relationship with the divine. For this, I am truly grateful. And it's in this gratitude that I release this word into the law. And as Ernest Holmes says, the prayer is answered before it is even uttered. Thank you, God. I let it be, and so it is.
So it is. Beautiful.
Wonderful, wonderful. I guess I'm so glad that we're so glad to have you here, Maggie. Hey, how does prayer show up in your life?
It shows up very different than it did even 5 years ago. I was not taught about the feeling tone of prayer. I was taught the steps of spiritual mind treatment. And I was told, this is how you feel when you do those steps. So I adhered to the rules. And slowly but surely over time, I began to really feel this feeling but it's been since COVID, because then I stopped doing everything and I just had me and myself and I here in this house. And my relationship with God grew to a place that I never dreamed it could be. Healings happened in my life that I never thought or imagined that could be. So a few people that I'm teaching now talked about retiring and what are they going to do? And I thought, you might find God like I did, because you won't be busy, you know. So prayer is something that kind of happens in me. Um, and when I pray in a meeting or I pray for a client or something, that's one thing. But when I'm here, I have several practices that let me know that it's time to shut up and sit down and be with God. And I find that I don't pray a spiritual mind treatment. But when I do the first two steps, I thought, well, what do I need to pray for? You know, God is here and all is well. And then when my mind is spinning, I throw my arms open and say, show me what's here. And that kind of dissolves everything, and that thing that I need to pay attention to shows up. I never was one to have, you know, a practice of 15 minutes in the morning. I just ended up doing it most all day, you know, at any time. I thought you can be still and feel the presence of God at any moment you want to. You just have to shut up and sit down and, or maybe even wash dishes and do it. But it's always here. And I think that's the main thing that I teach. And a lot of people have been calling me for prayer lately. Um, so I'm tasting it again in a way that I used to when I was at church all the time.
So I'd like to know how long you've been in this spiritual movement, and tell us the story of how you found it.
1989, it was in the summer, uh, and I was on the verge of suicide. You know what happened with Rob. And he was a teenager, and he, like most teenagers, went away from me. And I still thought that I was the one to control him. And so I saw a friend of mine. I lived on the corner of where the church was. I moved on that corner. And so I saw these people that I knew from the JC, and they said, how are you doing? And I said, I'm not doing too well. And they said, well, come to church. And I had been to a church when I first moved to Santa Rosa, a Christian church, had 1,600 people in it every Sunday. And then one day, and I didn't know how much I didn't like the Christian church when I was growing up. And one day he said, women are not, even though the woman that touched Jesus's garment was healed, he said, women aren't allowed to really touch the hem of Jesus's garment. And I said, I'm out of here.
Really?
And then I found the JC, and then I found the church, and it has saved my life literally and transformed me over and over and over and over again. And I owe that to Ernest Holmes and to all the teachers I've had, especially Michael Beckwith. When I found Michael Beckwith at Asilomar, I didn't understand a word he said, but I thought there's something here for me. And I actually knelt at his feet on those little tiny steps, and I told him I loved him. And then we became friends over the years. I was at Revelations every year. And at Revelations, my first Revelations is where I felt, because people talked about the veil, and I thought, well, that's just hogwash. I don't think I've ever said that word. Um, and Nikki Harris was singing, "You've got a friend, God is your friend." And that veil dropped on me, dropped from me. And I went, oh my God. I was 4 years into this teaching. I said, oh, that's what they mean. And I stayed there, and Michael and Ricky and Nikki were there. My head was in her lap, and I was weeping. And I told Michael, I said, this is what happened to me. And he said, you'll never see the world the same again. And he was right. And of course, I had to release 4,874 false beliefs, over the years. And sometimes they creep in. But I say, you're not welcome here.
Good for you. That's lovely.
I think that's wonderful. Actually, that speaks to the mountains of knowledge that you've gained over this using this philosophy. Hey, the tangible results that you've seen from prayer. I mean, you just speak your word and it just happens, or do you say this long, grandiose prayer that?
Oh, I don't do long, grandiose. I've heard that too many times to want to be the one doing it. Um, I really follow the rules of spiritual mind treatment. I don't take the condition into the prayer ever. And actually, at my old church, they are now saying, and they did when I was there, what do you want to experience instead of what is your prayer request? And
Very nice.
And I think that way you don't have to translate the condition into the principle into the thing. You just say what you want to experience. And it's certainly not
People
where
tend
they
to know
were.
what they don't want more than what they do want.
Yes. So that's easy. Because once you feel the presence of God, the language, people say, well, I don't know the language. I mean, I've taught practitioners about prayer that have been praying for 15 years. I still don't know the language. I said, oh my God, do you not trust God to deliver that to you? When I'm in that presence and there's no past, there's no future, this is it. This is the only thing that's happening. This language comes out and I hear other people praying like a robot, the birds and the bees and the trees and the this and the that. And I'm thinking, what are you feeling? In fact, I did a class for a friend of mine who was teaching Prac 2, Prac 1 maybe. And she invited me she said, I want you to be a guest. And the topics were, the 30 weeks. And I said, I'll take prayer. And so she says, I don't want you to teach us the steps. I want you to teach us the feeling. And Ernest Holmes says, I wish I could give you the page number. He says, you can teach form, but you can't teach the feeling. And I was doing a prayer for regular people, and then I did it for the Golden Gate Church, Mary's Church practitioners. I did retreats for them as well.
Nice.
And then my friend says, are you going to do it for Santa Rosa? And I had my stuff about Santa Rosa then. And I said, no. And I said, no, I'm not withholding anything anymore. And so I taught it to them. And these are seasoned practitioners for the most part. And it was amazing how, 15 minutes before the class with Corte Madera, I had this insight. And I thought, I always say when I'm really high on God, take me now, Jesus, because it can't get any better than this. And so I thought, I'm going to use that. So when they sat down, I said, let's be still. And I said, I want to do this thing before we pray. And I said, think of a time when you said, take me now, Jesus, because it can't be getting better than this. And I said, when you have it, just raise your hand. But I said, be with it and expand it in your mind. And then open your eyes and say one word. It was bliss and all this stuff. And several people were crying. And I said, that's where you start your prayer. Not until then. And then it just comes.
That's lovely.
And maybe even your reason for going there is even gone. because you're immersed in this feeling. Michael Beckwith said, don't ever think your way to God, feel your way to God. And I listened to him I still am, not all like I used to every day. I have hundreds of tapes and CDs of him, but he's the one that really opened my eyes.
So I love that example you just gave us of giving people a place to go, a way to move to a state that really accommodates this thing called spiritual mind treatment. Any other advice on ways to make treatment more effective?
Well, you asked about demonstrations. What I've found, especially like I said, since COVID, is that I don't know who said this. I don't think I made it up, but God knows what we have need of. And when I read, I have my textbook right here. I get into it a lot. I just open it up and say, "Oh my God, I remember this," or I don't. Um, but I have in my consciousness the truth that everything is already here, you know. And what I learned very late in my spiritual journey, certainly since in the last 10 years, I realized I was always giving. I was hardly ever receiving. People would say very nice things to me. Oh, your class is the best I've ever taken. And I would hear it and it would not go in.
Mm.
So I started teaching classes on receptivity. Because they say you always teach what you need to learn.
It's
And then
true.
I had a bunch of accidents and concussions and car wrecks and broken legs and arms and stuff like that. And I had to have help. So that was my best friend, Michael Gott. Do you know Michael
Oh,
Gott?
yes.
Uh, he said, the next time you want to grow, read a book or take a workshop and don't get in a car wreck. So I've been shying away from being hit by the cosmic 2x4 and really just go inside and say,
Great. You
everything
settled
is
the
here.
drama.
Yeah,
Very nice. Yeah.
yeah. I do like drama sometimes, though.
Well, we all do a little bit.
Hey, you talked about challenges, broken this, broken that, and things of that nature. How do you adjust when that happens in your life? Say, boom, something happens. What is your go-to? I know it's prayer, but at the moment, what do you think and what do you do?
In the moment of being triggered, I'll say that,
Yeah,
or smashed, or, oh my God, that's happening.
yeah,
I have learned, especially again, since COVID, since I have been quiet, God is right here. So Rich, I never felt loved in my life. I not only feel love, but I accept it and receive it. And I know that God loves me. And I know there are people I've met in this teaching who say God is impersonal. It's very personal to me. Because God's not going to say, I don't like you, what you're wearing today. I mean, there's no judgment there. I constantly tell people, they said, well, I have a big pig that somebody gave me for reasons I won't go into. And it has these big eyes. And when I was teaching the practitioner retreat, student retreats at church, I'd hold that pig and I'd say, this is God looking at you. And you tell me what it sees. It sees me struggling. It sees me trying. It sees me poor. It sees me like this. And some people say it sees me as itself, just like Ernest Holmes says.
So, Maggie, did you say that people say to you that God is impersonal?
Yes.
Wow, that's amazing to me because in the Declaration of Principles, Holmes says that God is personal to all who feel the indwelling presence. So that's a contradiction of principle.
Well, see, what I took from that, because I know that principle, and I said, and these people have been there longer than me and have different stations than I did at the time. I thought maybe they don't feel the presence of God.
That could be,
Maybe
but
they
that doesn't
just,
make God impersonal.
you know, it wasn't personal to me until I let myself be taken by it. I was
Nice.
sitting in my living room at my other house. This is probably 30 plus years ago. And I was just staring out the window and I thought, is this meditation? You know, am I meditating? And I thought, no, I'm just staring out the window. I had a revelation of the presence of God that took me over for about 30 minutes. And I thought, I want to capture this. I always wanted to capture stuff. I'm not prone to capture anything anymore. I just, you know, it's like Ricky Michael's song, I let the love wash over me. I don't try to hold on to it. But I wrote a statement, and the last line of the statement is, I accept that this is who and what I am. And I assume that when one has that feeling, because people always say, I just forget that God is here. Do you ever forget that God is here? I have my emotional life. You know, I'm watching the Warriors and they're losing and I'm pissed off, you know, but I don't live there. I just let this happen. Carol Huntley told me a long time ago in a workshop that I was actually part of this whole event, the Spirit of the Rose Festival. And she said, because I said, I can acknowledge that Rob was burned, but I won't accept it. And she said, until you accept it, you're not going to be free of it. Let your emotions take you over, because if you let them have their way, they come and they go. And I remember talking to a fellow practitioner who came to church one day, and I hadn't seen him in a long time. And he said, I'm holding on, holding on. I said, what are you holding on to? And he said, I just want to cry, but I just can't. And we went in the back of the church between services, and I said, do it with me. He said, I'll cry forever. And I said, I promise you, if anybody's going to cry forever, it's going to be me. But go ahead. And he let go, you know, and he was so grateful. And I said, we are meant to feel this. You know, and I'm angry and I'm sad and I'm this. And sometimes they say, God, do something about this. I say that. I remember Georgia Prescott. I don't know if you ever knew Georgia. She was a minister,
Sacramento.
Sacramento. And she said, sometimes I get on my knees and I say, please, God, show me the way. And I say, I've done that too. In those kind of desperate moments. But I don't, that reaction, you know, Michael Beckwith said, a reaction has no thought in it, has no choice in it. A response has choice.
That's right.
So my emotions give me emotional reaction, but then my response is to be still.
I
And
love
so
that
far
the
it's
idea of
working.
talking to God. That's great stuff.
Yeah.
Every night before I go to sleep, I say to myself, "Tell me what I need to know,"
Yeah.
and I go to sleep. And often I wake up with information I did not have.
I know I do a lot of stuff at night when I'm asleep. I wake up, this prayer thing that I was talking to you about before. I thought I'm waiting for the puzzle pieces to come together. And one morning I woke up and I went, oh, there it is. It's all put
There you go.
together. I said
Right.
all the pieces of it.
Comes into consciousness, and then it becomes form. You can see it. You
Yeah.
see it.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
the thing that interests me too is that you talked about unity, Michael Beckwith, who's agape. How have your prayers evolved over time? How have they changed over time? Did you just, you said that in the 80s you came into Science of Mind. Was there a path that you followed on that actually brought you to this point where you're at right now?
Rich, I started out by coming to this church and thinking I'm going to stay alive another week.
Yeah.
And I joined the church at the next, we did it at, 4 times a year. I joined in the last quarter of 89. And I was in service immediately. And then I took a class immediately. And then I saw the practitioners on the stage and they said, blah, 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 blah. And I thought, I can't connect to that. I thought, what are they doing? And I took another class, and then I didn't take classes, and I was just there, and I was in service, and I thought, my God, I have a life, you know? I didn't know how much I had to let go of at that time, but I thought, I'm alive. And Rob and I weren't hardly even speaking, so I said, maybe it's time for me to have a life.
Good for you. That's great.
And
So you've been teaching.
Oh,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. That
No.
turned into when I went to Revelations for the first time, and I had that experience. I came back and I said, and at Revelations on Sunday morning, they had the practitioners in the auditorium, lining the walls. And I went to get prayer, and I said, I'm in a space where I don't know what's next. And I came home and I signed up for the next class and went straight into practitioner.
Very nice.
I was a nervous
So
wreck the first time.
for your many years of being a practitioner, I'm just curious, when you treat someone, oftentimes someone will come back to you and kind of talk about what happened. Have you ever had anybody come back to you and say nothing happened or it didn't work? And if they have, how do you respond to someone like that?
Well, I mean, we were taught that when we prayed for somebody in Green Chapel, for example, when we see that person, if they come next time, because some people would get attached to a practitioner,
Right.
I never wanted to encourage that.
Okay.
But sometimes they would come back to a practitioner and they would say, I got this much or whatever it is. That happened to me a couple of times. And I remember that when in the teaching we were taught, like, when you pray for somebody, that prayer is done. You don't ever return to that particular prayer or even that particular situation. And I remember years ago, I was having trouble putting my feet on the floor and on the ground. There was a resistance in me to land here. And a woman who was in my practitioner circle, every 2 years you have to re-up it. And
Right.
she didn't ever have clients. And she said, does anybody want me to pray for something so I can present this? And here's her paperwork that she did a treatment and it had a result. And I said, well, and I'd had this going on for 6 months. I also learned way later from a fellow practitioner, because he said one night in the Sunday night service, he said, what are we not praying for? And I ask that question a lot. And it's stunning how many people react to it. But she prayed for that. I said, my foot's not hitting the ground, And then I had a demonstration. I went, oh my God, this is what showed up. And then she prayed for that condition. And then I had another one, and she prayed the third time. And the third time she prayed, that thing was gone.
Wow.
So
That's great.
I had to go through these steps, because what I thought it was had nothing to do with my physical body, of course. And I thought,
Excellent.
good Lord. I said, show them this. They'll give you those things without any trouble, get you relicensed,
Right.
So I learned that, and I tell people that was yesterday. Things change. Now what's present? What's present now? I never did take it personally that I didn't do it right. I just knew that sometimes, and Mary Murray Shelton was preaching at our church many, many years ago. This is when Edward would be gone during January. And then she was also doing a Wednesday night, and I was working there at the time. So this was early 90s. And she said, any prayer requests? And I raised my hand, and I was over by the air conditioner turning it off because it was almost over. And I said, I want peace with my son, because there was no peace there then, at least that I was aware of. And she said, what are you willing to do to have it? I said, I'm willing to die for it. 20 years later, we came together. And John, I've never been happier in my life than I am right now for the healing that I have done with him, and then realize that he's been loving me this whole time. And I've accepted it. And we got together for my birthday on the 13th of July. And I had this quote. I didn't have this quote, but 2 days later, I watched a movie, a Denzel Washington movie. And right before the movie, this quote from Mark Twain: the two most important days of your life are the day that you're born and the day you find out why. And I realized that day was why. I never felt freer, happier in my whole life. There was not one thought in my head that said, well, what about nothing for 8 solid hours? And then my next Monday was horrific. But I thought, that is still here. It's permanent now. It's not an experience I had.
Right.
It's an experience that is in my bones now.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear that, Maggie.
I know you are, honey, because you've heard a lot of bad stories.
But he's also heard some good ones.
Yes, he has.
So what's interesting is that we have a lot of people that watch this show that may not know about science of mind or the philosophy. How would you explain this philosophy to somebody that you met that doesn't even know what science of mind is about?
Oh, this is like the test, 25 words or less.
Well,
Without
actually,
using jargon.
Mark, so
What is science of mind? Yeah. Science of mind is, what does it say on the book? Something about it's a teaching, it's a philosophy, it's a way of life.
Right.
I don't think very many people truly realize that what they're thinking has something to do with the way they live and what shows up. Ernest Holmes lays it out beautifully in a lot of different ways, all of those chapters in this book. And I think if you're willing, if you want to change your life, if you're willing to trust, but I also learned this: if people don't trust God, they're not about to surrender to it, So that wants to be established. But I was desperate. So I needed something. I was willing to hold on to anything that would get me from one day to the next. And that textbook, because we had to read the textbook for foundations, back in the day. I don't think they do that anymore. And I got in this textbook, and I remember the day I found my favorite quote. And actually, I said this in a Zoom practitioner meeting the other day. I was asked for Ernest Holmes' quote, and it's: the realization of the presence of God is the most powerful healing agency known to the mind of man. And I read it, and I read it again, And I thought, you mean I don't have to do anything for this? All I have to do is realize it. It took me a while. It took me some years, but it's here now. And I remember that. And I remember, and Ernest said something like, this is very simple, but it's not easy.
Right.
And I thought, it's so simple. And sometimes my enthusiasm for this teaching, because it opens you up. It gives you another perspective. And perspective, you hear people say, my truth, my truth, my truth. I think there's one truth.
Thank
So
you.
what you're sharing is a perspective or an opinion about the truth. But when you say my truth and that truth is limited, and when it's stated, it's limited. I've had fights about this with other practitioners and ministers.
Well, you would have gotten a big hug from me on that one. I've been teaching that my entire career that that we don't own truth. We don't, it's not something we can manipulate. If it's true, it's true. We can use it, we can be aware of it, but we cannot claim it as ours.
But you can claim your truth.
Well, I can try. Well, it isn't my truth, though. I agree
No,
with
it's
John.
not.
It's I have complete faith in God, and I didn't have any of that in the first 50 plus years of my life. None of it. God was the man in the sky with a clipboard. I was the sinner. I was going to hell. Period.
Yeah, that's
And
what
then
they told us.
all of a sudden, Ernest Holmes tells me that I'm not. And when a person has no self-esteem whatsoever, and I'm under the guilt and shame of what happened to Rob, for somebody to say that to me, I think I'll hold on to this rope to get me out of this quicksand. And I stayed with it, and I stayed with it, and I saw people come and go, and people come and go when they got their, what was it, parking places, palaces, and partners or something. And I thought, I wasn't looking for any of that. I was looking to save my life and have a life. And so that's what this teaching gave me. I didn't, Rich, I'm sorry I didn't put that in 25 words or less, but I get very enthusiastic when I talk about earnest and science of mind and prayer. So you're
This
getting the
shows
best of me.
this, and we are getting, and you're doing fabulous, and we love you for that. I think it's just wonderful. But we have one last question for you, and John will be asking it.
So my final question is, what would you like people to take from this time we've spent together, those that watch this?
I would hope people would take away a feeling that I am speaking not from a book or from something or someone I studied, but I've taken all that I have learned and applied it. And this is my experience of the divine. This is my experience of myself. I have accepted myself in a way I never thought possible. I am happy in a way that I never thought possible, that I couldn't even imagine, you know. And healing comes. Michael, God, and I pray every week. We have our 2 hours together and we pray. And some of those prayers are rich. I'm thinking about your question. The next day, it's there. When I had that prayer, when Mary prayed for me to have peace with my son, that took 20 years. But I realized if I was receptive in those days, it could have happened much sooner. So I want people to know that you need to open yourself up.
Beautiful. Very
Open
nice.
yourself up, and God will bless you without prayer, without meditation, without study. You just feel the blessings. But I continue to do those things just
That's
in
lovely.
case. Yeah.
It's
So,
wonderful.
so would you be so kind as to treat us out of our time here together?
Absolutely. My favorite thing and the thing that I feel I was born to is joy. And there's so much joy and enthusiasm and zeal and wonder and awe. Thank you, John and Rich, for this experience of beginning the morning in this way. And for anyone and everyone that is listening or hears the sound of my voice and this prayer, we all are the light of the world. That's the absolute truth. God sees us as his own, responds to us as the perfection that we are. I accept this for everyone all over this world, that right here, right now, that God is here and all is well. I am grateful. I let this be, and so it is.
So it is. Beautiful.
We thank you, Maggie, for being with us today.
Thank you, Rich, for inviting me.
John, where can they find you at?
Well, some of the things going on in my life right now is that I have another podcast called Higher Reality on the Edge of Understanding. You can find that on Substack or Facebook or YouTube or probably any of the major sites, and it's under Mystic Living Press. Mystic Living Press. So I'm doing that. My newest book is out. It's called Spirits Awakening, and it's available on Amazon. And I'm getting ready to be traveling around the country doing retreats on my current interest, which is mastering manifestation. So that's what's going on with me. Thank you, Rich.
Awesome. On Prayers Radio, I'm Rich Jarvis. And like, subscribe, or support us. You can go to prayersradio.com and do that. And there's one thing that we need to say is that if you don't have a prayer, if you ain't got a prayer, you need to say a prayer.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's very important. So stay tuned next week for another fun-filled adventure of Prayers Radio. Everybody say
Thank
bye.
you, Rich. Bye, everybody.
Bye.